Hey, I'm Shelby, and I'm going to give you the story of my deconstruction, where I started, where I've ended up, and everything in between. So, before I was born, my mom and my dad did not grow up Christian, but when my mom was pregnant with me, she was in the shower and she looked down and she saw her baby bump, and she felt it was so miraculous, and she thought God was speaking to her in the shower, and she converted right then and there. And from that moment forward, she has been an extremely passionate, outgoing, self described Bible thumper. Witnessed to all her friends, started going to church every single Sunday. So that was the house that I was born into. I grew up watching all the classic Christian kids shows like VeggieTales, of course, Bible Man, McGee and Me. I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of secular stuff. Harry Potter was off the table, books or the movies. Lord of the Rings was pushing it, but I was able to convince her that that was okay. Now, because my mom was so deep in religion, deep within Christianity, so was I. My mom had me do all the after school programs like Awana. And so I grew into an extremely passionate little Christian child myself. One of my earliest memories is being in kindergarten, participating in a sort of mass child's conversion to Christianity. I remember our teacher just walking a lot of us through saying the Lord's Prayer. And up to that point, I remember it being the happiest moment of my life. I didn't really understand what was going on. I was just like, I'm asking Jesus into my heart, and everybody was excited and happy, so I was excited and happy. Now, fast forward to my baptism, and now this was the happiest moment of my life. But it was around this time that my family began to fall apart and my home life got really chaotic, confusing, and painful. My dad is and was suffering from bipolar disorder, and it was untreated. And he was also a severe alcoholic, and his life up to that point had been defined by immense suffering. So he was extremely traumatized, and so was my mom. Without going into a lot of detail, life at home got really scary, abusive, and toxic for myself and my sister and my mom. So, all day at church and school, I was being taught about the love of God and the mercy and righteousness of God and how the Lord answers prayers and that the Lord is the ultimate loving authority. And every day I would leave school and I would go home to an environment of fear and pain and suffering. There was a lot of dissonance between what I was being taught about God and what I was seeing at home. And it was hard for me to harmonize that. So rather than lose my faith, I became very compelled by the fear-based motivators for Christian belief. The idea of eternal conscious torment in hell was extremely motivating for me. If life on earth was getting so bad that I was contemplating ending my life, if hell after that was far worse, then I was going to follow God because I didn't want to feel any more suffering than I already was in this life. I became unhealthily obsessed with rapture ideologies, and I got really into the Left Behind books and the movies. And I thought about the rapture every day. We would watch a Left Behind movie in class and then go to recess and be told to go relax and have fun. But I would be thinking about the rapture and how my friends or my family or even me, if something went wrong with salvation, could be left behind and left here to suffer. And that terrified me and it motivated my belief. I was also terrified by spiritual warfare, demonic presence, demonic possession. I read these books, This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness. I thought that was what life was like. I thought there were demons everywhere, and I had a demon on my back causing me to sin, and that's why my life at home was so terrible for me and my family. So all I was left with at this point was a very, very confusing, toxic relationship of who God is, of what Christianity is, of what love and authority are. And I believe that this began to erode the foundation of my faith. Now, it would take a very, very long time for me to finally deconstruct and let go of my belief, but I held on to it for a long time based on fear. My community was extremely high control and very fundamentalist, so We were taught young earth creationism. We were taught that evolution is a global conspiracy. Now, I like to say that people don't leave systems that are working for them. And it got to a point where the system of Christianity, of Christian belief, was not working for me. I prayed every single day for relief for myself and my family at home. And it never came. Life got worse and worse. I attempted to end my own life twice. I was self-harming to feel anything. I still have scars all over my hands and my arms. Despite many warning signs, nothing was being done at school to help me. Nobody noticed. Nobody heard my cries for help. My high school used to take us on spiritual revival trips. They were camp retreats where the whole high school would go together. The parents wouldn't be there. We would essentially be spiritually manipulated for 3 days so that they could convert as many kids as possible, or bolster our faith, or start a revival. And I have a lot of very intense memories from these trips. They are definitely the most steeped in cult psychology things I've participated in. There were lots of rituals. They would exhaust us all day and then bombard us with spiritual sermons at night. On the final night, all of the guys from my grade got together in a side room being led by our vice principal. And this was supposed to be a time where we just shared what we were struggling with each other. My grade was pretty small. I think we had 63 or 67 people in our graduating class. So there weren't that many guys in this circle, in this side room. At this point in the camp retreat, I was feeling vulnerable and fairly safe. And I decided to share with everyone that I had attempted suicide a few weeks ago. I wanted so badly to be heard and supported. I knew I was a danger to myself, and I was really scared of myself. And this was a massive cry for help from my classmates and the vice principal of the school. And in revealing that information to them, I had never felt so alone and abandoned and unheard. The extent to which I was helped after that moment was a single prayer session right after I said it. No student, no teacher followed up with me. I wasn't sent to see a counselor. Nothing was said to my parents. I was simply prayed for and told to read my Bible. Now, I understand that Christianity, the Bible, Scripture can give relief to people, but that is not what I needed. It is dangerously irresponsible to ignore a red flag like that. So the system just wasn't working for me. Now, I mentioned my dad earlier, and his journey with Christianity has been extremely chaotic as well, and I think he pretended to convert to appease my mother. I'm not sure about that. Either way, we never really talked about it. Our relationship was not good from the time I was about 13 onward. It all came to a head when I was 18. My parents had divorced at this point. Things with my dad were not good. One night I got into a very, very dangerous argument with him, and I essentially fled the farm where I grew up. I lived in my car for about a month until my mom learned that I had left, and she told me to live with her, and then I ended up getting taken in by a family friend. I never returned, and I haven't really talked to my dad very much since then. It's been about 10 years. We have gone back and forth. But when I left that place and I graduated high school, somehow, I think teachers were fixing my grades for me. My depression kept plummeting, and I kept going deeper into nihilism and numbness. Now, I didn't know it at the time because I was only recently diagnosed, but I was suffering from CPTSD. I had lost my support group with my family. I was no longer in school. I was taken in by a family friend, and that was really, I think that may have saved my life. But it was around this time that I realized that Christianity had done nothing for me, had only given me fear and pain and confusion. I think that is why my brain let down some of the walls that were inoculated into me as a child, that were indoctrinated into me. And I found science. I learned that there are methods that we can use to differentiate imagination from reality. There are reasons to believe things. I didn't need faith to believe in something anymore. And that became extremely intoxicating and addictive. And I started reading about evolution, and I decided that it was true. I decided that the Earth wasn't 6 to 10,000 years old, and there wasn't a global flood. And I don't think this is why I deconverted. The emotional part is why I deconverted. I actually think that intellect and rationality are, in most cases, wholly separate from belief. Belief is an emotional, experiential, intuitive thing. And I think this is actually why personal intellect can be a barrier to truth seeking. The smarter you are, the more positioned you are to construct some sort of clever linguistic expression to resolve any sort of problem or contradiction that you're faced with that goes against your held ideological beliefs. So when I was a Christian, I could rationalize evolution away easily. Of course you can. You can come up with a rational explanation for anything if you put enough mental energy into it. It wasn't until the experience that I had with Christianity eroded my walls that I started to find reasons to justify non-belief. Now, at this point, I was still going to a church, not the church I grew up in. I was volunteering for the praise and worship team, and I was still in it, man. Like, I wanted to believe so badly. That was the only thing I'd ever known. Like, my entire life, I had never really met any non believers. I was so deep into this system that everything on the outside was terrifying because that was what we were taught. We were taught that people on the outside didn't have morals. They were just angry. They chose that they wanted to sin. They hated God, all of that. So everything inside was comfortable to me. But a few years after leaving home, I remember I was standing on stage leading a congregation in worship. And I looked out into that crowd as I had done many, many times before. And I saw them all with their hands raised. And some of them were crying. And that happened every single week. And I realized in that moment that all I felt in looking at them was guilt and disgust for myself. All I felt was that I was manipulating these people into doing something that I didn't even believe in anymore. I realized on stage that was when I completely let go. And we had a few more services to do, and all I wanted to do was throw up and run away because I felt like I was a liar. I ended up leaving that church over the next year, fell into such a deep pit of nihilism because I had lost my identity. I had lost my purpose, my ultimate meaning for life, my support net. I was truly alone at that point, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I had to live for anymore. When you go from believing that you have eternal life locked down and you have all the answers for everything in the universe, when you go from that to it all going away and you don't have the tools to find answers, find truth, you don't have the tools to achieve spirituality without Christianity, everything is so numb and dark and terrifying. And that's deconstruction. I think when you're indoctrinated into a cult, you're like a little kid and they start piling on rocks like doctrine of inerrancy, evolution is a lie, you are nothing without God, you can achieve nothing without God. Deconstruction is taking a rock off one by one and digging down to who you are, who you were before all of that, and reconnecting with that person, reconnecting with your body, because Christianity disconnects you from your body fundamentally, because the body is the flesh, it's sinful, it's why we are stuck here on earth, why we're disconnected from God. And so I hated my body. Now, not only did I hate my mind because I felt trapped in my head, I felt nihilism and like I was here without my consent. Not only that, but I hated my body because I'd been taught all my life to do that. That stuff doesn't just go away when you deconvert. That takes work. I started reading, Hitchens, Harris, all those guys that spoke with such a loud voice that they made me feel empowered, like I could build an identity, like I was justified in feeling like I was hurt by the system I grew up in. And I became very angry and confused with why that was done to me and why it was done to many children. I started to damage my old relationships with some friends I had because they were all still in the system. I was beginning to absolutely detest that system. So I would try to have conversations with them to understand how they felt about it and try to put myself back in their shoes. And my mom, of course, when I eventually told her that I didn't believe anymore, she was devastated. And nobody cut me out of their lives, nobody I cared about. But I can see the pain in their eyes when they think that I'm going to suffer in hell for eternity. And I empathize with that. I eventually began to meet with a religious trauma therapist. He saved my life. I've learned so much about how I was hurt by that system and how I was hurt by my home life and how the two things together resulted in CPTSD and resulted in the symptoms that I experience today. I have nightmares every single night. I am still very disconnected from my body and have a lot of self-hatred. I find it very difficult to celebrate my achievements because I was taught all my life to be a conduit to Jesus, so things would flow through me and somewhere else, and we weren't really permitted to internalize achievement. I've had to work on how to create boundaries because in a cult setting, you are not given boundaries. You're pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. You're made to be exhausted so you can't stop and think about what they're telling you. I've had to learn how to throw up these boundaries and say, hey, I need you to stop. I need you to respect my distance here and let me make my own decisions. I've come to a place now where I'm still very angry, but I'm channeling this anger into motivation because now my life goal is to become a scholar of religion and fight against misinformation. I don't believe that faith is a virtue, and I count it one of the great tragedies that faith is the defining salvific attribute of the world's most powerful and popular religion. It's a real shame that rather than faith, the defining attribute isn't something grounded in empathy, like reduction of suffering or the sovereignty of will. I'm just trying to take what I learned and convert it into something good. And I've said it before, but deconstructed people are like rogue sleeper agents. We took everything they taught us, and now we've broken out, and we know how they think. We know what they believe. We know all the strategies that they're given. And so I think we're uniquely situated to help people either escape the system or find a safe place to land when they escape themselves. Healing doesn't have a final destination. It's not something that you can stick a flag in and be done with. We are living in healing bodies, and that is probably an ongoing process. But it gets better all the time. You have to work at it, and you have to rebuild yourself. You have to find things to believe in. You have to create meaning and purpose. But if you can find the space to do that, it does get better. I used to believe after I deconverted that I no longer had anything to live for. And now it's the opposite for me. Now I believe that since this is the only life we get, we better make it the best that we can. Despite the lack of ultimate meaning for any of this, for why we're here, we can fight against that and make it something beautiful. And that actually enhances its beauty. Fighting against nihilism and emptiness, despite the fact that there's no ultimate meaning, meaning there's no infinite life after this, fighting against that is beautiful because we're doing it for the sake of it, because we're doing it for the love we share for others, for their experience, for our experience here on earth now. We don't have to be looking ahead to something else, just dreaming and hoping for something better after this life. We can make this one as good as it can be for each other. You create your meaning when you set up a goal for yourself to follow. When you decide that you care about other people and their experience here on earth, and you don't want to waste what we have here. Now, I hope you've been able to relate to my story. I left out a lot of details. This has already been really long, but I'm going to keep making videos, and I'll fill out my story as we go, and I hope to hear from your story, and I hope I can help you find some hope if you're struggling with this stuff. You are not alone. As atomized as the deconstructed community is, there are others like you. You can find community, you can find purpose and meaning, and you can enjoy life. I wish you the best. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.